This video was suggested and sponsored by our patron Dane McAfee. You can support our channel via Patreon, YouTube membership or PayPal. Feudal fragmentation and lack of a centralized state turned Italy into a field of battle both for the countless local states and for foreign invaders. Italy swallowed entire armies and treasuries, becoming the doom of many great kings and generals, and nothing epitomized these centuries-long all-out conflicts like the Italian Wars, which pitted against each other the two greatest dynasties of Europe, the Valois and Habsburgs. The Battle of Pavia was the climax of these wars. The 100 Years' War finally ended in 1453, leaving England with Calais as its sole possession on the continent. The new French king, Louis XI Valois, used this period of relative international stability to fight disloyal vassals. His main opponent, the Duke of Burgundy, Charles the Bold, was killed in action at the end of the Burgundian War in 1477, leaving his daughter Mary as the sole heiress of a vast fief. Both the French King Louis and the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III Habsburg were eager to acquire these lands by marrying their sons to Mary. Frederick succeeded in this endeavour, marrying his son Maximilian to Mary. In the subsequent war, Louis was defeated by Maximilian. The Treaty of Arras divided Burgundian lands between France and the Empire via the marriage of Louis's heir Charles with the daughter of Maximilian, Margaret. However, Charles VIII would renege on the marriage treaty in 1487, deciding to marry the heiress of the Duchy of Brittany, Anne, which sparked another conflict called the French-Breton War. Although Charles won against a number of French nobles and Maximilian, and married Anne, he was forced to sign the Treaty of Senlis in 1493, basically giving away the remainder of Burgundy to the Empire. All this proved that the Valois and the Habsburgs were too ambitious to remain at peace for long. Charles would look for other opportunities to add to his domain, and in 1494 he would get one. The Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza, asked him to invade Italy using his weak claim on the throne of Naples. This invasion kick-started a 6-decade-long conflict called the Italian Wars. We are planning to cover the Italian Wars in the future, but in short, between 1494 and 1521, 3 conflicts were fought, during which Spain and the Habsburgs took over Naples, while France gained the Duchy of Milan. In 1515, Francis I became the King of France, while in 1516 the heir of the Habsburgs, Charles I, became the King of Spain. The death of the Emperor Maximilian in 1519 made the Holy Roman throne vacant, and both Francis I and Charles I were the candidates. Getting that throne would have given either of them hegemony over Europe. The electors voted for Charles, and that meant that France was now surrounded by the Habsburg domain from all sides. The dynastic rivalry, multiplied by the personal animosity, made a war inevitable. Charles struck first in 1521. His troops restored Francesco Sforza to the throne of Milan in 1522. The local French troops were defeated at Bicocca and forced to retreat. Francis recruited a new army in 1523, but as Charles de Bourbon rebelled against him, he was delayed. Bourbon managed to escape into Habsburg territory. The king was now forced to stay in Paris to prevent further political dissent, and send his favourite, de Bonnevet, in his stead. In October of 1523, the French entered Italy with more than 25,000 troops. However, the experienced Spanish general Prospero Colonna outsmarted de Bonnevet by indicating that he had more troops than he really did. De Bonnevet decided to go to his winter quarters, and that gave time for the Habsburgs to gather around 30,000 troops. Fortunately for the French, Colonna passed away in December, and his replacements, Charles de Lannoy and Bourbon, reached the area too late to prevent the French retreat. However, de Bonnivet failed to pay his mercenaries in time, so by the time he reached the French border in the spring of 1524, he had less than half of his troops. Meanwhile, Bourbon's 10,000 entered Provence in the summer and took all the major settlements save for Marseille, which was besieged in September. The city stood defiant, and the arrival of Francis with most of his troops forced Bourbon to retreat to Italy. Francis had around 40,000 men. He ordered them to enter Italy in 3 columns in order to cut off Bourbon's troops, yet the latter was too quick and managed to retreat to Pavia, linking up with the remainder of the Habsburg forces. The French king was undeterred. He ordered his troops to surround Binesco on the 24th, thus threatening the line between Milan and Pavia. The citizens of Milan lost all hope and presented the French king with the keys to the city on the 25th. The forces under Lannoy and Bourbon didn't know about this. They moved in the night and carried out a maneuver in order to enter Milan without fighting the French. When they entered the city, it became clear that the fortifications were not strong enough to withstand an assault, so the Spanish retreated to Lodi. Francis moved his troops into the city a few hours later and gave his troops some rest. A 9,000-strong Spanish garrison still remained in Pavia, and Francis ordered his army to besiege the city on the 28th. The main force under the king remained to the north within Visconti Park. 4,000 under d'Alençon were placed to the west, and 4,000 commanded by Montmorency were to the east of the city. By the 31st, French artillery reached the area and was divided into 3 batteries, the northern, eastern and western. The bombardment of the city started immediately. The French still needed to surround Pavia from the south in order to take control of the river Ticino. 6,000 troops moved there on the 2nd of November. The commander of the garrison, de Leyva, had a very unique problem. He had more than enough food, but lacked the funds to pay his mercenaries. According to the sources, the gold from the churches was used as a salary. By the middle of November, the French had finally managed to destroy a small section of the wall, both in the east and the west. De Leyva started to create defensive fortifications within the walls. On the 21st, the French assaulted the breaches, with Francis himself leading the eastern portion. This assault failed due to overwhelming fire from within the city. The French lost almost 1,000 men, and the king ordered a retreat. The siege continued, yet constant rains made artillery ineffective. Francis decided to continue the siege in the hopes that the besieged would run out of food or money. He was forced to send 6,000 men to the south in order to secure Genoa, as the Spanish navy was getting ready to disembark in the area. In January of 1525, Spanish troops received almost 20,000 reinforcements, and they now had around 30,000 near Lodi and 9,000 in Pavia, against 30,000 French troops surrounding the city. By the end of the month, Lannoy approached the walls of Visconti Park from the east. He managed to sneak in a small cavalry detachment with orders and supplies. Both Habsburg forces were running out of funds, so the showdown was getting close. Lannoy's plan was to sneak in from the northern portion of the wall and attack Castello di Mirabello, where Francis's headquarters presumably was. At the same time, part of the garrison was supposed to sally out upon a signal. On the 23rd of February at 2200 hours, a group of Spaniards started moving towards Porta Pescarina in order to breach the outer wall of the park. French cavalry under Tisserand were patrolling the area and noticed them, yet he ignored it, thinking that they were retreating. By midnight, the engineers were in position and started destroying the wall. They obviously were very loud, but Tircelin sounded the alarm only at 4 in the morning. A 3,000-strong French pikeman unit was sent to the area under de la Florence, and Tircelin's 1,000 horsemen joined them. A small artillery battery was also placed against the point of breach. By 5 am, 3,000 Spanish arquebusiers under de Vasto entered the park through the breach and opened the nearby gate. They were followed by light cavalry and cannons, all concealed by the morning fog. At 5:30 am, Tircelin's cavalry finally came into contact with their Spanish counterparts, yet the fog didn't allow the lines to engage in full. Meanwhile, the Spanish arquebusiers entered the forests to the north of Mirabello. The cannons weren't able to enter the forest, and without any support, they were captured by de la Florence. At the same time, Francis sent a small cavalry detachment in order to learn what was going on. These horsemen attacked the Spanish cavalry's flank, and that allowed Tircelin to push the enemy back. Messengers were sent to the king with a claim that the Spanish attempt to enter the park had been repelled. The signal from the main Spanish camp was sounded, and then their cannons started shooting volleys against Montmorency, who prepared his soldiers for a sally from the eastern gates. But the besieged moved out of the northern gate towards Mirabello, cutting off the eastern portion of the French troops from the main battle. At 6:30 am, de Vasto's troops emerged from the forest and took Mirabello, yet Francis wasn't there as expected. They tried to move to the south, but cannon fire from the east caught them in the open, and the Spaniards retreated back to the castle. Meanwhile, more and more Spanish troops entered the park from the north. An 8,000-strong Landsknecht unit met de la Florence's 3,000 Swiss pikemen, and although the latter were outnumbered, they managed to fight for hours. Another Spanish group of 8,000 footmen and 2,000 horsemen under Pescara entered the park and moved towards Mirabello at 7:20 am. Yet by that time, the French king was aware of the situation and ordered the northern French battery to shoot towards the forest. These volleys killed upwards of 1,000 Spaniards. 2,000 enemy horsemen were right in front of Francis, so he started forming up his 4,000 elite heavy cavalry, the gendarmes. Their charge dispersed the Spaniards immediately. Yet this was a mistake. In mere minutes, the French cavalry were surrounded by the 15,000-strong enemy from 3 sides, and as the gendarmes were now blocking the line of sight of their own artillery, no help was coming from that side. Francis still had 4,000 Landsknechts and 2,000 footmen in reserve. They were sent forth to relieve the cavalry. Yet the Spanish had one more 8,000-strong group approaching, and soon the French infantry were fighting for their lives. In less than an hour, the best French knights and footmen were killed, while their king became a hostage. De la Florence and Montmorency attempted to retreat to the south under the pressure, but many of the soldiers drowned in the Ticino. Only the western portion of the French under d'Alençon managed to retreat in order. The French lost around 15,000 killed or captured, and most of their commanders ended up dead or captive, while the Spanish lost less than 3,000 in total. The war was effectively over, and France seemed lost. Yet the mother of Francis, Louise of Savoy, became regent and quickly stabilized the situation, gaining allies in Italy, England, and even the Ottoman Empire. With new problems in Germany, Italy, and on the Ottoman front, Charles was eager to end the war with Francis. In January of 1526, the Peace of Madrid was signed. Francis promised to marry the sister of Charles, Eleonora, cede French Burgundy to the Empire, and Milan to Charles de Bourbon. However, as soon as Francis returned to Paris, he reneged on the treaty with the blessing of the Pope. A new treaty was signed in Cambrai. Francis was to pay reparations and relinquish all his claims to Italy. This war was just a page in the rivalry between France and the Holy Roman Empire, and more documentaries on their conflicts are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.